Okay, teach us quickly so that I can bowl through at least 20 minutes of a shear.
Okay, so got a halacha here from Parshat Balak. Bilam tried to curse Bnei Yisrael, but his curse turned into a blessing, and there is a prohibition against cursing one's fellow Jew, and that's in Vayikra chapter 19, verse 14. And an example of this is it's forbidden to utter a curse or harsh word against someone out of anger, even in private. And a store owner shouldn't say to somebody, "May you lose your job," even if he's under stress and having a bad day. One shouldn't. Uh, it all goes back to negative speech. And then Parashat Maseh, which is coming up next week, the double parasha, which ends the book of Bamidbar. There's halacha which we're discussing, which talks about Are Miklat, cities of refuge for accidental killers, people who kill b'shogeg, that's accidentally. And an example is that they give here. Community must ensure proper safety standards like fencing, rooftops, swimming pools, construction sites to prevent accidents. And they give another interesting example about a yeshiva. A yeshiva that has carpentry classes for the bochrim must provide safety gear and training to avoid negligence and liability. Okay.
Okay, what was that last thing? Because we went from not cursing anybody to liability. I just don't understand the leap. What do you mean?
That's from, no, to, uh, it was talking about the city era Miklat where someone accidental homicide. So you must be careful with securing places of work, providing safety gear, etc. If people are doing uh, plumbing jobs, electrical jobs, carpentry jobs, etc., so that there won't be any injuries. People must be careful to have all the safety procedures in place and say and gear and protective clothing and gear, etc. That's what it says.
Okay. All right. So on that wonderful note of accidental killings, let's get started. Okay. So um basically we need to define. We said that the bottom line there are four different types of possible consequences and rulings. The first one is a premeditated murder, at which there's Hazroa warning that two witnesses or the victim um, warns the murderer that what he is about to do is an avera and its respective consequence. Even the murderer could form that warning and say, I know what I'm about to do is wrong and it's a death penalty, but you slept with my spouse and took half the business. So it can come from multiple sources. We even said came from a demon, meaning quite literally we can't discern which person said it, but more than one witness heard it being said. Then on the other side of the spectrum, you've got what you call la'oines, which is a complete accident and there's no liability or negligence on the part of the um, Jew for causing that accidental killing. Rav Simcha Steinhauer actually used an example a few years ago on Durham Road by George Avenue. There was a woman that was smacked by her husband and she ran across the road and it was near Hathorne Road, and this normal guy from the community hit her with a car and stone dead. And she ran into the road. He was going at the speed limit, and it's messed him up for years. So we don't actually understand the impact of what an accidental killing can cause a person, and sometimes the ability to go to galus and almost have a way where you know you're putting skin in the game, and there's a consequence is psychologically healing, not just healing for the soul. So that's also something to bear in mind. And I remember there was a case in Weinberg where somebody ran across the road and my mom hit them with a car. She didn't die, but suddenly half of Alexander Township was around a car, and a police officer fired a shot in the air, and they all dispersed. So sometimes having to be escorted by obviously a military or police force can provide great protection to stop people from either killing that person or there to be a mobbing. So these two aspects of exile make a lot of sense. The So we said on the other spectrum, so that's, for example, we're going to learn that if you're in a forest, now whether or not somebody's checked their equipment or not is very difficult to ascertain, simply because it might only be you. I'm hearing reverberation when I'm giving the shear, and I'm not sure which computer it's coming from. And I sound squeaky like the best of times. If I had a voice like James Earl Jones and it had that like rhythm and blues timbre, I wouldn't mind. But I sound like a chipmunk, so it's distracting me. My own voice. It is what it is. Um, I've got a voice for newspaper and a face for radio, so it is what it is. So okay, so let's just discuss. So the opposite end of the spectrum, we said, is in a forest where another Jew is entitled to be and you entitled to be, like a public area. Then anything that happens on a negligence basis, you liable for. So you could say, did it mean the person checked their axe, that the handle was well attached to the axe head, the metal axe head? And we say, yes, we think he checked it, but we're not sure because the only thing left is a dead victim and the person that said he checked his equipment. But the point of it is if on the basis of a Jew dying at the hands of another Jew, you go to the city of exile, then on the case when you had intent to kill by having a deadly weapon or a surgical instrument, but in fact it didn't turn out like you thought, and it was almost misguided, then for sure, Rabba is saying in that particular case, you don't get the merit of the city of exile, both from an atonement perspective nor from a protection from the Goel Adam. Whereas Abiah said, listen, what you intended to do and what you did, although it was in terms of a killing, it certainly wasn't a degree of negligence bordering on the deliberate. It might have had mens rea and actus rea, which is the act and the intent. But if you'd have known that the fetus could have been taken to term because of an abnormality pre-incubation and technology, then you obviously wouldn't have done it. Whereas Rabbi said it's not good enough. You actually aim to abort the fetus, and you should have checked these things, and there's liability. In terms of the animal and human story, the very fact that you had a weapon there and it happened to have gone bad for you in terms of whom you killed, a human instead of an animal, in that particular case, what the heck are you doing with a weapon where other Jewish people can frequent in a public domain? So these are the contrasts between Abai and Rabbah. That's what Rabbah says. And as far as Abai is concerned, Abai said, but you never intended to kill another Jew. So they're holding at different areas, and that is exactly okay. So. Um, sit. So we see that they hold at slightly different levels. A buyer holds generally that the reason you don't go to exile is because it's a leniency bordering on accidental, or certainly there's no intent directive. As far as rubber's concerned, what you thought was allowed and what you thought you killed and what you actually did was bordering on the deliberate because you were grossly negligent. And therefore, you don't go to the city of exile because you don't deserve the atonement or the refuge. Do you see the two different positions about why you can't go to the city of exile? Yes or no? Very straightforward. So now we're going to discuss a case where you do go to the city of exile. So basically, there's a brisa that basically defines inadvertent killing, and in a state of how do we put it like this? We base Bishka guys the inadvertency of it. That's in Bamidbar chapter 35 verse 15, and this Bivli Da'at. is without awareness, then that's in Devarim chapter 19, verse 4. So you need basically either inadvertency or a state of non-awareness in order to go. That's the quintessential case at which somebody goes to the city of refuge. So the Gemara is saying, listen, we need another brisa, and it expounds at length a different verse, and that's in Bamidbar chapter 35, verse 22, not verse 15. Because the rabbis taught in a brisa when they were expanding on the issue, it uses this term, if it was suddenly. Okay, so if it was suddenly, what does that mean to you? Guys, I'm asking you a question.
Unintentional, it sounds like.
Okay, well, suddenly takes away, what would be the opposite of suddenly? I'm just looking for one word.
Immediately.
Premeditated.
Exactly, Arthur. That's exactly it. If it's sudden, it's different to planned. If you say there's spontaneity, it didn't mean that you pre-planned it or premeditated it or had some sort of plan. So even secular law recognizes the difference between something that happened suddenly compared to something that happened on a premeditated level. Now, it doesn't remove accountability because there's two sorts of, what do you call it? Sudden, please. Come on, wow, the whole day. It's now sitting on the Gemara. Guys, can you hold on a second? Little snake with fur. Come, sweetheart. Why? Why now? The whole day we were playing. We were playing very nicely. Just hang on. Okay. Yeah. Come. All right. All right. The cat's allowing me to sit on my stool, which is an excellent thing. So what we are saying is that in terms of premeditation, you get the maximum sentence. We often use this case of a wife having a life assurance on a husband and the boyfriend knowing that and wanting to run away with her, and the husband gets poisoned over a period of time. They throw the book at him. He gets the maximum sentence. If it's a case where a man comes home and he sees his wife having adultery and he's in a fit of panic and rage, he's certainly going to be punished, but they might throw some leniency. So premeditation is a course of action which obviously gets a huge amount of severity, okay? As opposed to this term in the Gemara, if it was suddenly. So the Brisa said one of the reasons you go into Galus is in a quintessential case if it was suddenly. From that, the Gemara says it excludes from exile a death which results from somebody turning a corner. And what example does it use? What do you mean turning a corner? It means that somebody's walking with a knife in his hands and he inadvertently kills somebody coming around the corner. Now, guys, what is that you can interpret it as? Do you think the person there is guilty or not? In other words, he doesn't stab somebody. He's holding a knife for protection. He's walking in the middle of Hillbrow, and somebody walks into the knife and he dies. Do you consider that a liability for exile under the term suddenly? Because if it's suddenly, it means there's no premeditation. Because the Gemara uses the term, instead of premeditation, it contrasts the word suddenly with ambushed. If you wait in ambush for somebody, that's a very sinister motive of premeditation. So that's the term that they use. So if somebody's walking with a knife to protect themselves in Hillbrow and somebody walks into that knife, can you see it as the fact that that person is liable or that was an accident? How do each of you see it? And can you see it both ways?
Gross negligence.
Okay, on behalf of whom? The victim or the person holding the knife?
No, the guy carrying the knife, because you can't carry a knife in the street in front of you, because as you go around the corner, you can easily stab somebody.
Okay, so Gavin says there's gross negligence there.
And he won't have to stand trial and you won't be allowed to go to Ira Miklat.
Okay, so yes, we're dealing with an exclusion case. So it says that if it was a sudden thing, you generally do go to the city of exile because it wasn't planned. However, if in the case of a death resulting from somebody turning a corner, for example, he has a knife and somebody turns a corner and makes contact with that knife, that excludes them from the city of exile. But is it because in Gavin's holding the opinion is that it's so negligent, then it's bordering on deliberate and he doesn't deserve the protection nor atonement for exile. Okay, so that's Gavin Stoller's opinion. Now, let's go through. Lance, what's your opinion?
Sorry, I'm not with you.
Okay, at what point did we lose you?
I'll pick up. Sorry, my mind's a bit elsewhere.
No, that's okay. I mean, did you get any of it, or or you had to deal with a call or work, or your mind's elsewhere? It's fine. I
I
mean,
was dealing with something, yeah, but I'll catch up.
okay. I always get caught like that. Don't worry, Rabbi Goldschmidt always catches me on the minute I could be listening for 41 minutes, and it was the same thing with my parents. They'd catch me doing the one thing, and I could be good like a whole week, and they'd catch me with the one thing that I did wrong. I did a lot wrong. Anyway, let's go back.
No, whole week. That
Yeah, I was gonna say a whole week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's
Whole week.
Arth, what's your opinion? Guilty or
Well,
victim's fault?
no. Okay, so I kind of like look at it from both sides. Like the one, okay, fine, it was an accident, but if you're carrying a weapon or whatever you're doing, you got to make sure that it's in a place that can't harm people because you're in a public domain. But he obviously maybe he was holding because he was feeling insecure. I don't know, but I mean, my situation is if you're going to hold a knife and kill someone, make sure you hold it down or you do it in a way that somebody, if they come around, can't get hurt.
Okay, reasonable.
That's my
Gavin's thought.
It's like if you carry if a security official or a policeman, I was a reservist for many years, and you're carrying a weapon, you don't put one in the chamber while you're walking around, unless it's a dangerous situation. You don't. It's the same thing. You've got to keep that. The guy should have that knife maybe close to his body or at his side, and not out away from his body holding it. So that is negligent.
Okay.
Unless it's a dangerous neighborhood, that could be a mitigating factor
Okay.
in his defense.
It's in Hillbrow.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned Hillbrow. Okay.
Yeah.
And you went to Africa.
Bro, you should be locked up for only carrying one knife.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough. Aiden, he's got his hand up. Yeah.
So obviously he feels that his life is in danger if he's no longer concealing the weapon and has it out to his side. Or like I'm guessing he's not walking it with it like directly in front of him because nobody really walks with it like that. And I'm assuming that he's holding it at his side and maybe he moved his arm to scratch his arm or something and it landed up in front of him and when the guy turned the corner he got pierced by the knife. So I would say it's negligent, but I wouldn't put it in the category of gross negligence.
Okay. Okay, that's reasonable. So the other ideas come in. The one is mitigation in terms of an unsafe area, and the person feels they want to protect themselves. And Aiden says nobody walks with a knife like that. They generally would walk with it semi-concealed. And it could have been that the victim's walking at a very brisk pace, and he turned the corner, and the two didn't see each other.
Yeah, like if he was just walking, like covering his eyes with his arm outstretched with a knife, then obviously that's gross negligence. You can
Yeah.
see somebody getting stabbed like that.
Sure. So we're getting closer to the fact that it's obviously not going to be at that level. Otherwise, there's not even a question. And Mr. Simpson, any thoughts?
Yeah, so initially when you first read it or when you said it, I mean it just seems negligent, seems ridiculous, right? But if you like break it down a little bit more, you have to like ask questions. Number one, when was it? What part of the day? Was it during peak hour? Was it during early morning when no one was there? Was it at night when nobody was there? Was the person who was turning the corner, was he running? Was he not running? So there's different factors. So I think the surface, very easy, looks negligent, Excel for sure. But I think there's different scenarios that you can put into this, and which would make him not liable at all. For example, early morning, no one's around. Next second, this jogger comes from nowhere, and boom, stabs, and he's dead. So it's hard. It's hard to say. So I'm not sure exactly where the Gemara or what the Gemara is talking about when it says such a simple case. I just don't know all the parameters.
So I think that's the entire point of the Gemara, is that what it does do when you're learning any piece of Gemara, whether it's civil law or criminal law, is that they say what seems obvious is not necessarily so black and white. And there are a myriad of factors that could affect the level of culpability and who is to blame. And we need to look into details as opposed to just general principles. And I think that's exactly what it does. You come to a immediate conclusion, and then when you examine it further, it's not so straightforward. So in summary, there are two approaches as to why the Torah exempts us from exile. According to the Ritva, he understands this to mean that the victim entered the intersection before his killer reached it. In other words, he's a guy that walked at like a huge pace and just quickly turned the corner. And there's a certain way to walk that is not very conducive to good health. If you generally, we learned this in the case of a beam with laws of damages. If you run at a hell of a pace and you don't watch where you're going, and a vehicle hits you, or there's a pothole, or the minute you add velocity and being unconscious of what you're doing, you're part of the problem. And therefore, it can be considered, according to the Ritva, close to a complete accident if the victim himself didn't behave the way most people do by giving a reasonable space. Because nobody just walks around the corner. You don't just unless you see the terrain. And therefore, even if there wasn't enough, they could walk around the corner and there could be a massive pothole or some object there that might cause you a huge amount of damage. So the Torah in that case could see it as a karov le'ones, in other words, a complete accident. And the Torah would only decree exile when the accident happened basically in a way that it was too fast for the victim to have avoided it. Meaning if it's a case where the victim was in fact partially to blame, there's no exile in that regard because it's deemed a complete accident. Now, as far as the Rambam is concerned, Maimonides, in Hiltzach Rotzeach, in chapter 6, verse 10, he sees the complete opposite extreme. He said any idiot that's walking around corners with knives has an obligation to consider that somebody might be coming from the opposite direction. And therefore, as Aidan said, you would keep the knife either concealed, or you certainly wouldn't walk with it in a direction that anybody could bash into you. So therefore, not exercising the proper degree of caution is bordering on criminally negligent. And when it's that negligent, it's deliberate, in the sense that that wasn't a small degree of negligence, it was absolutely negligent. Now the Ritva, so look, it's not merely a conceptual difference. We said that the two differences is that you might not go to exile, but if you don't get atonement and you don't get protection from the Goel Adam, you leave yourself in a very physically and spiritually vulnerable position. And that's why it matters. In a case where you would go to the city of refuge, if something happened suddenly, that as you were moving a beam of wood, somebody appeared and it wasn't a weapon. That's for sure one thing. So one of the factors that determined that is this an object that has utility, or is it generally used to hurt others? Which is why legally, I remember when we were doing martial arts, one of our senseis said to me, it's always a great idea to keep a star screwdriver in your pocket, because it's very difficult to explain when you had a knife that you were actually going to cut chicken with it instead of somebody's throat. Whereas that if you had a star screwdriver in your pocket, you could say you were on your way to fix a plug, and somebody accosted you and accidentally, because they assaulted you, you shish kebabbed them in the esophagus. So in other words, the weapon itself has got another utility. So in other words, these are all factors. Then on this term, suddenly there's one other person excluded from exile, but I think Kevin has to go at 10 past 7. Is that correct, Kev? You want to go now? We can call
No,
it.
if you even, but we'll do the whole link. It's fine. No, it's
Okay, no, we've got just a minute left.
we finish the whole link. It's fine. The whole share is fine.
So
The whole time is
if it
fine.
was suddenly as opposed to
It's no problem.
ambushed or premeditated or anything where there was planning, you go to the city of refuge. Excluding from that is if some person is irresponsible and they're carrying a knife, or it was the victim's fault, in which case it was deemed a complete accident. You generally would go to a city of exile if you killed without malice, meaning you had no enmity towards this person. This person wasn't your enmity, no hatred. And if there's no malice, it means there's no motive. So what is motive? Motive is two things. If you hated the person, that's motive. If you stood to gain as a result of their death, that was also considered motive. So it excludes from exile someone who kills an enemy even advertently. So what do we mean? Accordingly, in Rambam, and actually in Sanhedrin in 27b, it says, look, if you've had an argument with somebody and the town knows you haven't spoken to them for 3 days, even if they were your best mate, but you're not on speaking terms, and people know about this, and suddenly he walks past your house and you were busy putting paving onto the roof, and suddenly a concrete block lands on his head, they're not going to see this as an accident. If they can pick up motive apart from enmity or the fact that there was no malice. So malice is one, and the fact of it is if you're the beneficiary on a $3 million life insurance policy, that's another motive. So is the person your enemy? Is the person, do you stand to gain as a result of their death? Maybe people know that you used to date his current wife, and the two of you are mad about each other and they haven't got a good marriage. So motive is one of the factors that they look at. So that's pretty straightforward. In that particular case, you wouldn't get the city of exile because they don't believe that there's a problem. Okay. All right. So I think, guys, can we end on this note, or because Kevin has to go in a few minutes. Unless you want to go for another 6 minutes, Kevin, it's up to you.
Yeah, no, I see. I'm just going so that I can get there. It won't take long to get. It's fine. No, we can do the whole thing.
Let's just go through a couple of minutes.
Use all the time.
All right, let's just go through a couple of minutes. So excluding from exile we've done, but anybody that pushes inadvertently with your body, you're liable for exile. Why? Because it's that sweet spot. It's deemed neither a complete accident nor close to deliberate. So I'd use the example of you go to a rock concert, and you got a heavy metal concert or whatever the case may be, and you're getting in this head-banging vibe, and you're moving around, and suddenly one person gets knocked out by somebody else, and they hit their head on concrete, or it goes wrong. Nobody went to a concert to have their life put upside down or kill another person. So in that case, okay, there was a degree of negligence, but it certainly wasn't bordering on the deliberate. And it's neither a complete accident, and therefore that's the perfect candidate to go to the city of refuge. Now it says further, if you threw any utensil upon him, it's going through the same puzzle. And what does that include? It includes anybody that kills with a downward motion to facilitate an upward motion. So what we are dealing with here is, okay, what happens if you have a circumstance where you're bending down in order to push something upwards? In other words, the downward motion is a preparatory motion in order to push something up. You've got to go down in order to go up. You're bending down to push something up. So we are saying that although how do we judge the motion? Is it the actual direction or the ultimate purpose? That's what we're going to learn, and there are different opinions. There's a buyer, there's Rabbi Yehuda, etc. But in principle, generally any downward motion at the time when it kills, even if it's going to be sequentially followed by an upward motion, it's the actual motion that you're judged by, not by the ultimate purpose. And therefore, as far as this is concerned, you would be eligible to be put into exile. Okay. Now we're saying, what happens if you throw something? In other words, without aiming, you actually excluded from exile if you aimed in one direction, but your projectile went in another direction, where it hit somebody and killed them. Now, in that particular case, we're going to say, are you excluded because you shouldn't have thrown at all an object that would have caused death upon impact, and therefore you can't guarantee that necessarily your aim is going to be halfway decent? Or do we turn around and say it's a complete accident because you didn't throw in the right particular direction? So it says, and one who did not take aim excludes from exile one who intended to throw something a distance of 2 cubits and threw it 4 cubits where it hit somebody and killed him. Okay, so I'm just going to explain what this actual pasuk means. So if one didn't take aim, and it excludes from exile one who intended to throw something 2 cubits and killed him 4. So basically, if we go back to the Ritva, if a person kills as a result of throwing or shooting something and missing his mark, if he misses in the wrong direction or overthrows his mark and kills, he's exempt because it's complete accident, meaning he had a particular area at which, so in that way, he's very much like a buyer. He wanted to aim left and his arm went right. It's a complete accident. But the Meiri feels the opposite way around. The Meiri said, listen, any projectile that you throw, even if you're not shooting a gun, you can't be so sure that your aim is going to be good. And therefore, if you're just chopping wood with an axe and you're going down and that axe handle flies off, you're not aiming towards another Jew in the forest. You just, both of you are there. And if 2 people are there, you should check your equipment to avoid this happening. So certainly when you're throwing something across, you cannot guarantee you know where it's going to land and how far it's going to land. And it's not merely a conceptual difference at all. Okay? In fact, what does it mean? It means that when it's close to deliberate, you're probably going to get killed by the Goel Adam, and you're going to be spiritually held accountable where there's no atonement process in this world. Now, interestingly enough, the Rambam, Maimonides, actually differentiates between the two. So he said, if you throw and it lands in the wrong direction, it's bordering on being close to accidental. But if you overshoot your mark and your aim is very accurate, that you're liable for, because you dead on in terms of where you're directing it to, but you can't guarantee that that you'll get the distance right. But for sure, if it's the wrong direction, that's an accident. So that's how the Rambam holds, a mixture between the Meiri and the Ritva. All right, guys, we're done.
Oh, well done.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great.
All right. Sorry, guys,
Yeah,
we're getting
thank you.
past. It's no good to drag out an issue to death. Believe me. No pun intended. Cheers.